The interesting thing about things is that sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes some things may even seem to be in some kind of state in between. Like maybe they are and maybe they're not. Maybe a pass that's in the air is both complete and incomplete. Maybe a pass that hits the ground was both the fault of the deliverer of the football and the receiver, or who should have been the receiver. Sometimes in this crazy, complicated world, things are, well, crazy and complicated. And to help get us through this wilderness, this forest of truths and half-truths and untruths and part-truths, the good news is we have the man to solve it all. Never fear, both and man is here, and Seth Keysor is going to drive us to the promised land. Or maybe.
Yeah.
Welcome to Only Avant-Garde Analysis. I'm Joshua Brisco here with Seth Keysor. Seth, good to have you back again today. Good to have your piece in the Chief of the North newsletter. Bad to have yet another one of these days where the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
You know, it's good to be back. I appreciate you and Nate covering for me on Tuesday, and I appreciate everyone in the comments who, supported the bullying that took place a little bit there. But we all have our off days. I just what I appreciate is hearing just in the space of a couple days, you've come to really accept the fact that two things can be simultaneously true. One is that there are no right or wrong answers, and two being I have all the right answers. Now, I know what you're thinking. That seems inherently contradictory. And yet,
this is the thing. You may think Seth may have, you would assume, the most black and white moral compass of us all, knowing everything else about Seth. But the truth is, maybe not. Who cares, honestly? And who knows? Certainly not me. Did the Taekwondo test go well? Actually, I'll tell you what. If it didn't, say it did, because I don't think I want to be I don't want to have learned right now that there was some terrible disaster. And I believe Lucas's path to get to it, was it a new belt test? Was he breaking blocks? What was the deal on Tuesday?
It was breaking blocks.
We get
and doing the test.
Oh, fantastic! Let's see this block. What belt is he going for here?
Orange and yellow.
I mean, that block didn't stand a chance.
And there's a nice moment there in that. So they always have them. That's their first board break, right?
Uh-huh.
And so they do a good job with this particular gym, and I'm sure they do in many Taekwondo gyms. Their big thing, their tenets, one of them is, well, you can do hard things. And Lucas is a really capable, sweet, smart, sensitive young man who I'm in the process of teaching him that he can do hard things. And so the breaking board thing is always a cool moment because it's the first time they've ever really done anything like that. And so they have them do the Hana dual set, like that's 1, 2, 3 in Korean. And so when they count to 1, they go, yes. They count to 2, I. And then when they count to 3, as they stomp down on the board, they go, N. And it's kind of like it's a really cool moment. And that was actually his 17-year-old older brother, Mason, who's a black belt, who was holding the block. Him.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it was a nice moment, and I got to be there. He actually saw me. So they do the board break. They have a whole routine they have to do. They've got multiple different, I don't even know what you'd call it. I don't remember what they call it. It's not routine. That's the wrong word. Mm-hmm. But it's you have to memorize it, and then you have to just go through a series of tests. Which I appreciate. They have a fairly decent standard for the kids to advance, which I have always appreciated. And it was really, really a sweet moment. When they first got there, I wasn't there yet. So while Lucas was waiting his turn, I hadn't arrived. So I got there, and he didn't realize that I was there until he was doing like the first turn and punch in his thing. And he saw me, and I got the biggest smile. And then he was trying to focus and do his thing again. And those are moments that you can't have without awesome coworkers like you guys and an awesome boss like I have in the day job. Shout out to you, Karin, letting me get after it and do the important things in life. So I just appreciate it. But let's face it, I mean, I'm not going to say it's good or bad that I did it because there are no truths anymore.
Exactly.
I've decided to take a more nuanced approach to everything. I actually
almost everything, I would argue, but most things,
very nearly
things,
everything.
I don't know.
So those who are listening, what you don't know is Josh and I, you're not going to believe this, but we often talk about things not related to football. And
but what's funny is that the firecracker of this one is a football thing.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
But I what Josh has discovered over the years as we've grown closer and talked about more in-depth stuff is that it's really hard to pin me down into a position because I'm always kind of sitting on a fence in most areas. I tend to hold firm and I'm tough to maneuver. And I saw you make a face, and so now I'm just being ridiculous on purpose.
Man,
but
it's here instead of me.
It's really tough to get me to take a hard line stance on anything. And I find that the older you get, the more you realize how little you know. And I thought I learned that lesson at like 25. Then I thought I learned that lesson at 30 and 35. And at this point, I'm genuinely concerned with how little I'm going to know by the time I'm 50, because I'm not going to know squat based on how much dumber I'm getting as the years go along. So I'm excited now knowing that we don't know anything to talk about everything.
That's the only way to do it, in my opinion. And that I think is perhaps the guiding light of this show from this point on, if not already through many, many years. And Seth, as I alluded to early on, one of your, I would say, most middling pieces in the Chief of the North newsletter is available now. What happened to the deep ball? It's good. I would say it's very good. I really enjoyed it. I think it's useful. I just don't want to say it's certainly not your best or your worst. And then between that, who's to say?
It's hard to say whether anything is really good or bad, because first we have to define the terms, don't we? What does it mean to be good or bad? That's the one thing. It becomes so ridiculous. The older you get, the more you start to resemble what's his name from The Princess Bride. It's like, I've only yet to begin. You're from Australia, and those Australians are notoriously, and it's just the whole thing is ridiculous. But the older you get, the more you're like, man, there's so much to think about. And also,
we can all agree I am the Wesley of this podcast.
As you wish. And so you know what? I wouldn't mind being Inigo Montoya.
You would be lucky. I would be lucky.
Any of us would be lucky to be Inigo Montoya. My algorithm has been blessed recently to start coming up with Princess Bride clips. Fantastic. And I just forgot how incredible it is. It's just like, you'll have to wait. I hate waiting. What if I gave you my word as a Spaniard? No good. I've met too many Spaniards. And he doesn't even fight him on it. He's like, yeah. It's like, and then suddenly the serious face. I swear to you on the soul of my father, Domingo Montoya, you will reach the top alive. Throw me the rope. I mean, it's great. It's hard to have a movie that like frame by frame, line by line is perfect.
Yeah. And they finally made a good movie based on a kissing book, which is also like nearly impossible. I mean, it truly,
absolutely,
it holds up unlike much else. So I don't have another segue. I kind of only had the one. My name is Joshua Brisco. Here's Seth Keysor's film review. Prepare to lie. Let's talk about the deep ball and what's going wrong. What went wrong last year? What's going to end up impacting this season? I want to start, Seth, with not Patrick Mahomes, because I will say that, this kind of we've been talking about this obviously for, years in many forms. We've been talking about this for a while, but there was that 5-ish minute supercut of all of those Mahomes dropbacks in an air quotes clean pocket, 20 plus yards. You laid this all out in the newsletter. The guy who did the cut up of that had very specific filters for what a clean pocket was getting charted as and everything. So I think he is free of any accusations of trying to influence the discourse, right? Like he's just doing this for all quarterbacks. And this is what the Mahomes one looked like. There's believe it or not, room for some nuance amongst things like what's a pressure. But here's what I'll say at the very, very top. I, watching that 5-ish minute cut up, had a really bad time. It is not a fun watch, regardless of the reasons that it was what it was. It sucked to watch that again and go, man, all right, so that didn't look very natural. Okay, well, Mahomes missed that one. Okay, well, it's been a while. I didn't see a whole lot, a couple games in a row there. Oh, Travis Kelce. And then Xavier Worthy stepped out of bounds on that one, even though the ball was good. I mean, it does feel like a little bit of a comedy of errors. And to get a good comedy, you need a lot of people playing their parts, which the Chiefs offense certainly did. Outside, I want to build to talking about Mahomes.
Okay.
What jumped out to you on that first dive into trying to separate the individual things from the big problem?
Absolutely. The first thing that stood out to me, not just watching that clip, but I've gone back and I actually went and I watched every deep ball attempt, which is 46 plays. And the way that this guy did it, which is the best way to do it because he's doing it for every quarterback, was just to use NFL Pro's filters. And so NFL Pro can have you filter pressure or no pressure. Now, you're at the mercy of what other people define as a pressure. There were a few clips in there where, to me, it's like, well, an unblocked dude sprinting at him is still a pressure, even if they haven't gotten there yet. Or if you got, like, there were a couple where the line had been scooshed right into his grill. And that's just not a realistic, even though it's not technically a pressure because the offensive lineman is between him and the player. Right. That's still going to affect the throw. So, that is what it is, but it's fair. When you utilize a process, even one that's flawed, the same for everyone, you get to the closest approximation of fair that you're going to get in this world.
Yep.
And so the thing that I noticed, not just watching the ones that were labeled as no pressure, but the ones all together that included pressure, is the lack of any one thing being the problem. And so that's what I started off writing about, is that we tend to, as a people, and I think this is more a Western culture thing, we tend to view the world pretty binary. There's a right answer, there's a wrong answer. And some of that, like if we really wanted to go deep into, Judeo-Christian heritage in terms of, certain things. And by the way, there are some things that are morally right and morally wrong, not taking that position.
I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah. I had a deep abiding faith until I met Seth Keysor, and then just it all fell apart. So what I find quite often in legal work or in football stuff, especially in football stuff, because I get a chance to communicate with a ton of people, is everyone wants to know the answer, right? Mm-hmm. What is the thing that stopped this play from working? And generally speaking, people view that as an end-all be-all. And so then what happens is it also leads to sides, because if there's the thing that's the problem, right? Someone talking about another problem means they're arguing against the thing, and that means you need to argue with them. So that's how you end up. An easy thing would be the Nick Bolton discourse that everyone's tired of. Like if I decide that everything is about an argument as to whether Nick Bolton is elite, and someone says, well, he has some limitations in coverage, what I do is I take that statement they made, and then I move it to say, to basically be treated as a premise arguing against me. Oh, you're saying he's no good. You're saying he's not elite. No. I'm saying one thing, because two things can be true simultaneously. You could have a player, and I'm not saying this is how I feel about Bolton, but you could have a player who has some limitations in coverage, but is still an elite player, right? If you make up for it elsewhere. So we do this, and that's a long
Here's a better example. Patrick Mahomes is an elite player, but it's exclusively his fault that the deep passing game fell apart last year.
Exactly. And so, like, if you were to tell people, and we'll get to Mahomes, if you were to say to people, well, Mahomes is a part of the problem, and even a big one, they immediately rush to their side of previous arguments. And we all do that. We love to bring our previous arguments against other people, and then we aggregate that into one big argument, and then anything anyone says, we treat as part of that argument. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
And so what I found is there is a lack of the thing when it came to the Chiefs deep ball stinking last year, and it stunk. It was putrid. It was bad. It was terrible. Now that is an absolute truth. The why is more complicated.
And I even, especially in a situation like this, I forgive everybody for looking for the thing initially, because the thing is way easier to fix than the several things. Like,
Yes.
if you could have just said the best case scenario for you and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid would have been to go through all those deep passes and go, man, left tackle is the thing that ruined the deep ball for the Chiefs, which is
Right.
good because you pay Jalen Moore, you draft Josh Simmons, your guard situation has changed, but you fix left tackle. Okay, well, the deep passing game is good again. But that's not what's on tape there. So now you're talking about improving this aspect, this position group, this thing from the best quarterback in football. All of that becomes harder and harder to resolve as you find more and more little things that are contributing. But it's the truth of the matter. It's also happening with every single team in football on both sides of the ball across the board. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were the part of problems that kept their team short of a Super Bowl last year. They were also, by and large, the reason their teams were competing at that level, right? That's sometimes it's maybe even easier to see that argument when it's not about your team, but I think people understand where you're coming from here. So let's pick a couple of the issues. I still want to work up to Mahomes because I think he's the easiest guy to look at because he's the one throwing the ball, right? And your eyes are on him from the moment the ball is snapped until it comes out of his hand.
Right.
What did you see from the protection, first of all? And is there, as we talked about some last year, did you see a relationship between early season struggles to mid-season lack of trust? What changed when Joe Thuney was at tackle? How did the protection play into it for you?
Sure. So you start with the protection. That's one of the things that everyone knew about. The Chiefs had a fiasco occur at left tackle last season. They put all their eggs in one basket, and that was a rookie. And I guess you could argue maybe they put some of their eggs in the Wanya Morris basket, but that doesn't seem sensical considering the decision they made previously. They put all their eggs in one basket, and it backfired horribly. We could talk about him having too short a leash or whatever, but there's no debate. The left tackle position was poor to the point of not allowing certain types of plays. And the biggest thing I would note here is it doesn't stop you from developing certain shot plays, whether they're plays with rolling pockets or slid protections or whatever, right? What it stops you from doing is having it be built into an offense. Those deep shots being part of the consistent reads.
A natural part of the offense, is that fair?
Yes, a natural part of the offense to where every given play, there's a deep shot that's being seriously considered. By the time they got to midseason, outside of against Cleveland, where I think they were experimenting and it went poorly, really windy day for that, but whatever, they just quit. They were just like, nope, we're only doing this on design shot plays, and that's about it. It wasn't really built into part of the offense. The left tackle play was problematic. That honestly, you're always going to give up some pressure from other places unless it's Joe Thuney and Creed Humphrey playing left guard and center. Even they, I guess, lose occasionally, but not really. Trey Smith at times, not, but a pretty low percentage of the time. But it stands out more when you have a consistent problem in one place. That makes the failures elsewhere stand out so much more because the frequency jumps up so much. But so really, the left tackle position was far and away the biggest problem in terms of pass protection, other than when Joe Thuney took over. I would argue the entire left side became a problem. Thuney did the best he could. I'm not going to relitigate all that, right? Sure. He did the best he could with the limitations he has, but it's still, there's a reason why their offense was still not doing much deep because they saw that it wasn't going to work out. They saw what happened against Houston, and then we saw it twice against Houston. And then we saw it in the Super Bowl that he just wasn't built to be a left tackle. So that was a huge part of the problem. And if you look at the 46 plays of pass attempts, 20 yards or deeper on NFL Pro, you will see several plays that are just ruined by that kind of protection. And then that makes the other protection failures stand out so much more. Like a good example of another protection failure, Travis Kelce's missed block at the end of the game against the Raiders. They designed a shot play on fourth down. Worthy cooked his guy. and Mahomes just couldn't put his body into it and overthrew him by like a yard. That might have changed a lot of narratives there. So the protection was a huge issue.
Obviously that has been, I was going to say it's been the biggest area of needing to fix that in this offseason, but also, not to belabor or preview a point we're going to get to, they did trade away Joe Thuney, who was not the problem until he was moved, and then even then that was a swapping of problems, as you've mentioned. The interesting next little bucket before we get, well, actually really there are two parts of it look very, very similar. The O-line's going to look different this year. The wide receiver group is going to look different, but probably more like it did in training camp last year. Obviously, right. Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown both go down very, very early. And then there are problems from the wide receiving core. Is the wide receiver category for you more about the play that Justin Watson doesn't make that he's got to make, or the play that Xavier Worthy's got to make on the sideline that he doesn't make? Or is it a fundamental issue with what they're able to run when your receivers on the field are Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, and Juju Smith-Schuster, whoever it would be?
Yes, both.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, damn it, man! I forgot the whole point of this show. The answer's both.
Yeah, and so it'll happen occasionally. And we talked about this at length. They tried to reinvent the offense. Then they had the weird timing of the injury with Brown, and then the weird timing of finding out when he was going to be back. So they had to switch a bunch of things around. Tried to give Xavier Worthy a wide receiver one role after Rashee Rice got hurt. He wasn't ready for it. Later in the year, as they slowly eased him into it, he did a lot better. Worthy had a couple of failures on the sidelines. One of them was much more on Mahomes than him, but there were still plays that he should have brought in. Yep. He had a couple of contested catch situations that other guys might have brought in. A couple tough catches. Like one of Mahomes' best throws of the year was in the right side of the end zone near the end of the season. That Worthy was just barely out of bounds, but he caught. I think it was against the Texans, but unbelievable throw. It just didn't quite work. So the problem is, and again, you got to remember all this stuff works together in a complementary way badly. Because normally when something's complementary, that's a good thing. But no, these things are combining to make the problem worse. So the lack of ability to gain separation within the first 15 yards of the field by Justin Watson, that affects what you can call up when you've got him on the field 50% of the snaps. Juju Smith-Schuster's inability to be a threat deep at all. That affects the play calling. All of these things, Xavier Worthy misplaying a couple of balls. DeAndre Hopkins not being very sure-handed last year down the stretch. All those things definitely affected them. And with the receivers, you could tell Mahomes some of the trust issues from 2023. He started off the first 2 or 3 games just firing. And then he had a pick or two. And a couple times guys weren't where he thought they were going to be. A couple times he misfired. And then you saw him tighten it up a little bit. It's like, nope, okay, can't do that. And so the wide receivers played a role in that too, in terms of Worthy's development. Way better at the end of the year. First game Xavier Worthy versus last game Xavier Worthy, significant improvements. That's a big deal. So, and then obviously losing Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown never getting fully integrated. All of that matters. That should be, in theory, at least improved upon this year with Rice's return, with Brown hopefully fully integrated the entire time, and with Worthy's improvement.
I think you kind of inferred the issues from the coaching side at the beginning of this conversation, and I think it's going to get kind of roped in as we talk about Mahomes and then what the coaching staff didn't do last year needs to do this year. But I want to run a couple of things by you on the Mahomes front, and then there are a couple of these things that you've already written about in this review. But especially the idea of like first few games 2 seasons ago and being like, oh man, you're seeing him sling it, a couple of picks, it backs off. Watching the playlist there for last season's first few games, the number of times when it felt like Mahomes was, even on, these are deep passes, these are 20 yards or more downfield, guiding the football out of his hand, where like, I'm not really here to give you the definitive word on Patrick Mahomes' mechanics as a quarterback. Like, I'm very, very willing to let him color outside the lines as much as possible. I'm not super stressed about when his feet aren't set usually, but sometimes it happens. You see it. There's an impact of that. But the number of times, especially in maybe that first half of the year, it felt like less than half of those deep throws were actual heaves, as Matty Lane would say, throwing with his chest. There were
Right.
a handful of those throws where I just kind of wanted him to throw it with his shoulder, like, not mechanically necessarily, but a lot of those passes where I don't know if it was short arming or kind of short stopping, which again, that can be super beneficial in all of the ways where his mechanics are creative and a positive. But there was a bizarre kind of lack of juice in most of those deep balls. It's why some of the way too late deep shots in the Super Bowl stand out in a positive sense, where it was like, oh, he actually cut a ball loose in a way we haven't seen very often this year. That kind of jumped off the screen to me. You went on and wrote a little bit about the drifting, which also I think is a compounding issue when you're drifting and flicking and guiding and all of these things that I think take some of the velocity out, and then maybe also some of the accuracy, because you're changing the timing of this entire play and trying to drop it in a bucket. I don't know if there's a way to blame Marquez Valdez-Scantling for this. I don't know. I don't know how we're going to get point A to point B, but it was a frustrating kind of bummer watch, because it did feel like Mahomes spent an entire season of his career having very little confidence in the deep ball.
Absolutely. And that's where you get to Mahomes. And one reason people want to absolve him is because some of the issues that he had, I think, are explainable in terms of losing trust in the protection and in your receivers. And here's the problem. When you lose trust in your protection, what does it do? It speeds you up, right? You feel like you got to get rid of the ball faster. You lose trust in your receivers. What does that do? It slows you down. You got to see it, right? Instead of throwing to a spot, instead of throwing with timing, and throwing with your chest, like go watch the first half of the Ravens game. Like that first week 1 game, he was just, boom, 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 out, 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 which in turn helps the protection, right? Or if you really trust your protection, I can wait for it. I can kind of let it develop a little bit and whatever. But when both of those things are going wrong, then you end up with a quarterback who looks jittery. And that's how we looked at times, especially with the deep ball, where you could see you could almost see him thinking. You could see him wondering how much he had to speed it up. But you also saw him, even as he's speeding up his feet, he's slowing down his throw. That's what it looked like to me. And that's a bad combination, because if you're speeding up your feet, it is going to affect your accuracy, especially down the field. Mahomes can throw accurately off platform better than anyone I've ever seen. But that doesn't mean it's as accurate as it is with good mechanics. There's a reason, like mechanics aren't just like a joke, there's a reason it's taught, because it helps you improve on your consistency of accuracy, especially down the field. With sped up feet and slowed down or hesitant eyes, you create this almost disjointed appearance that you'd see on some of these deep throws where he'd finally let it loose, but with his feet out of whack or like you said, almost lifting, pushing, trying to drop it in a bucket, trying to make it perfect rather than just firing it in there. And I think that's where you come into the areas where Mahomes himself was a problem with how he threw the ball down the field once he lost some of that confidence. And it wasn't all the time. He still made some incredible throws, of course. But, and this is where you get to the final thing. I know we're going to want to keep talking about Mahomes, but because the coaching staff saw these problems, they just stopped trying. And I understand why.
I am going to loop back around to the coaching staff and hit the super chat here in a second also, because it kind of it loops all that together. But my last very specific Mahomes-based thing, and maybe you'll have to answer this with the coaching conversation. What's your hunch right now? Does that get better? Is that something, and does it get better by a lot? Is there a small evolution? Because it was such a point of conversation last offseason through training camp. It was something the Chiefs wanted to do, and then for all of these reasons could not do at a feasible level. Should I be expecting it to look significantly different next year than it did last year, or are you more middle of the road on that, perhaps, to say I'm not sure they do have the ingredients to get that deep passing game back that hasn't really been as much of this team's calling card in a very long time as a lot of their reputation would still carry?
Right. I actually am going to rely on one of my subscribers for the Chief of the North newsletter, whose username is Big in Japan, which is fun because
Fantastic.
I'm part Japanese. This is interesting. And I think this is great insight into whether or not it can be better. So he commented on this article. Watching that video was genuinely helpful because I have seen this from Mahomes before in a completely opposite situation. Not many people talked about it at the time because Mahomes was so great. But there was a time, and this is absolutely true, by the way, it's me interjecting. There was a time when the weakness of Mahomes' game was easy passes to the flat. It was such a problem that I asked on a Chiefs Q&A whether Mahomes should consider switching to all underhand passes. It was really bad. But then Mahomes worked on it a lot. And he references the 2022 season. All of a sudden, what had been a sloppy footwork nightmare turned into a staple of his arsenal. So great. That he actually said, how do you say repertoire?
Repertoire. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay, repertoire. I got scared of that word, so I said arsenal. But so this is absolutely true. If you look at the tape from 2018, 2019, 2020, and it got better, but 2018, 2019, it was not great. And it started to get better, and then was almost automatic by the time you got to 2022. Those quick throws to the flat, you would see Mahomes kind of like what Josh Allen still does at times when he's not careful. What do those guys have in common? Incredible arms. He would just airmail or dirt, an easy throw to the flat. And because his feet weren't consistent, and that's where the footwork stuff that we all mock for good reason, I think, but whatever, that it can matter. If you are doing it differently every time, it's like a jump shot. If your jump shot's different every time, you could still become a very good shooter. But every now and then, that's just going to bite you. And that's what happened to him. And then he worked on it a ton. And then suddenly he just stopped missing those throws. He still last year hardly ever missed those throws. We've seen Mahomes be a better deep ball thrower. I would argue that even in 2018 and 2019, when he was at his best with it, he was never an elite deep ball thrower like Russell Wilson, but he was good at it. Last year, he was bad at it. If he cranks that up to average at it, that moves the needle. And with big plays, if you just change 3 or 4 of them, it can change almost everything about the offense. So I do think it's something that can be worked on. I think it's something that he's shown he can work on. But there's going to need to be some intentionality to it in terms of his feet and his eyes and getting those things back in sync.
And it also seems like there is going to have to be an emphasis there from the coaching perspective. Again, you wrote about this, that within the cycle of all these things going wrong, you understand how a coaching staff gets a little gun shy, but also it was impossible to ever imagine this team getting into a deep passing rhythm without ever really trying to do it. This super chat from Joseph Jackson said the lab mentioned that they should move to 2x2 rather than 3x1, saying they aren't built to run that anymore. Do you find that's the case too? I'll add on top of that. I mean, I feel like I didn't hear this specific conversation from the lab guys, but I would assume that answer is very influenced by your view of Travis Kelce. I think it's got to be very influenced by your view of this receiving room. And we've talked about different ways to keep Hollywood and Xavier Worthy clean at the same time. What do you think about that? And also, this is a different question. What would it happen to you physically and emotionally if Andy Reid came out next year and the offense, in a way that I don't know the average fan would clock, obviously, of like, they're running fewer 3x1. Interesting. But for Andy Reid to kind of break recent tradition that way, I can't think of a lot of times he's done that recently in that big of a structural way in the maybe post Tyreek Hill trade when they had to change. What do you make of that view of it?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea because one thing, and I'm about to say some really oversimplified stuff because some of this is going to be over my head. Go follow Honest NFL on Twitter if you want to get much more in depth about 3x1 versus 2x2 and the differences of what you can do in formations there. One thing about 3x1 is you've got this backside receiver who's isolated that in theory, you should be able to have a guy who can win on your inside routes, on your digs, or, maybe even, shake someone and get, to an outside corner, whatever, right? For years, the Chiefs had 3 guys they trusted to be that backside guy. They knew Travis Kelce couldn't be covered one-on-one. They knew Tyreek Hill couldn't be covered one-on-one. And Sammy Watkins, when he was healthy, was solid there. Not great, but like Sammy Watkins would have been the best receiver on the roster by a country mile last year until Worthy came around, right? After Rice's injury. So now Who is that guy? Maybe it's Rice this next year. They were certainly developing him that way last year, but he's more in the 3 side of the 3x1. He's more the guy that you've got there threatening those quick passes, the yak stuff, some of those shallow things, as opposed to being a true one-on-one winner on the backside. So I actually could see them doing that because you maybe just don't have that one guy. And then after they traded Hill, someone commented that I thought was a great comment. Maybe it was even the same person, where he just said, Jabin Carter, I don't understand how the 2022 offense was the number 1 offense in the league with Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS as the top 2 wide receivers. A few things went on there. One, they had competent left tackle play. And Orlando Brown Jr. got kind of a bad rap because he's not an elite left tackle or even a really good one, but he's competent. And now we've seen what it looks like when you replace competent with a sieve. Okay. And then the other thing is, in 2022, Travis Kelce could not be covered one-on-one basically ever. And that's not as true anymore in 2024. And so you still don't have that backside guy. They were able to get away with it somewhat there because of Kelce. And that's just kind of how it goes. The offense evolves. And so it's an interesting idea. It would be interesting to see Andy. I've seen him change the offense over time, and I'm assuming we're going to see some development here in 2025. Although I really do still think they just kind of plan on running back the plan for 2024, because the 2024 plan looked a lot like the 2023 plan, just better executed overall. Because make no mistake, the offense was better in 2024 than it was in 2023. It just still wasn't as good as we'd like to see.
And it doesn't feel true. You're right. But right. It was better and certainly more efficient. But the fun coefficiency went way down. and the Mahomes moments went down in frequency for these things that we've talked about here. And truthfully, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of other reasons. You think about 53 players on the roster, all of the support staff and all of the crew and all of the coaches and all of that. I mean, those people all go through every day. What do they have for breakfast? How much did they sleep? How's everybody's body feeling? The number of factors that go into an NFL team simply proves time and time again, the truth is out there, but you're never going to find it. So just don't believe anything ever. That's what Seth said, I think. Is that misrepresenting you at all?
It's hard to say.
Let's take a break. Yeah, who cares?
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competitor, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We got a little bit of Chiefs adjacent news a few days back, and Nate and I discussed it briefly, but this was the topic. Spoiler alert, friends. This was the topic that really, that firmly, if not permanently, well, nothing's permanent, that really temporarily put Seth Keysor right on the fence. And I understand here the layers to this one as well, but it is interesting to take a look at the Joe Thuney contract, the extension he got with the Chicago Bears. Seth, it is $51 million over the next 3 years with $33.5 million fully guaranteed, $17 million per year. Really, it's 2 years of guaranteed money. And I don't think I gave this enough credit on Tuesday. If those numbers from Schefter pan out, a 2-year contract extension at $17.5 million per year, making it 51 for 3 years with $33.5 guaranteed, 2 years at $17 million, 34. My math is all correct. It's a 2 years of guaranteed money for Joe Thuney, and then a chance to keep him around for 17, 18, whatever it's going to be in the last year's number there. Meanwhile, the Chiefs are at this point with Trey Smith, where he is signed the franchise tag, and the negotiations have some time before it becomes problematic, but his average annual value is going to start with a 2, and the second number is not going to be a 0 or a 1 or probably a 2 if I had to guess. In terms of the AAV he's looking for. Seth, I know Trey Smith is significantly younger. I know the idea is that his arrow is still pointing up. I would tend to believe that it is, but his arrow has not ever gotten to Joe Thuney's current arrow, potentially pointing down as he ages, as robots do. Where does that leave you in the Chiefs shuffling here of trading Joe Thuney, using that pick to move up to go get Noel Williams, and tagging Trey Smith and making that the plan to try to keep him and Creed Humphrey together? It's going to cost a pretty penny for Smith.
The what they got in return for trading Joe Thuney wasn't necessarily surprising. It's a little less than I would have hoped for, but it is what it is. When you're selling on an older player, one thing that you get, kind of bonus points for or whatever, is you've gotten out before the fall happens, right? Because It's always going to happen. You just don't know when. If Trey Smith continues to play at the same level he's played for the next 2 years, just 2, I would view this as a bit of a rough thing for the Chiefs. The reason being, and there's a bunch of ifs here, if Trey Smith starts playing at the exact same level Joe Thuney did, which he could be, 90% the pass blocker or 95% the pass blocker and still be a better player overall, because he's a guy you can actually formulate your entire run game around. That matters, and I acknowledge that. He's a tone setter, all that stuff. But unless Smith becomes as good as Thuney, then basically the way this looks like the correct choice for the Chiefs is if Thuney drops off in the next year or two.
Yeah.
Now, if let's say Trey Smith stays exactly who he is and Joe Thuney doesn't drop off for the next 3 years, then the Chiefs are going to pay significantly more for equivalent play at best, or slightly worse play. It's the reason that had it been me, and I love Trey Smith, I would have wanted to keep them both. Honestly, it's a pretty reasonable price for Joe Thuney. And considering that you're drafting your tackle of the future and all that, I don't know. But I get why, you can't pay every offensive lineman a top 7 market salary. I get that. A big part of me, even though I understood why they're going the route they went, and Nate not argued for, but kind of presented that point of view in terms of youth and ascending, all that stuff. I get why they did it. It's probably not what I would have done, especially knowing that Joe Thuney was willing, because that was part of it. Well, what would he be willing to? It's the last year of his contract. Knowing that he's willing to take that $17 million and layer that year after year after year, because right now, $17 million a year, in terms of, the guard market, wouldn't even put him in the top 5. It takes him, I think, about 7th in the league. Well, this time next year, it's going to be 8th or 9th, give or take. And that's just how that works.
By this time in a month, it's going to be 8th.
Solid point. So that's a route that I would have, that's a route that I would have considered, but I'm more of a bird in the hand being worth two in the bush guy. And I understand the mantra that often gets repeated that it's better to be too early than too late with veteran players. I get that. So if Joe Thuney falls off or Trey Smith gets about 5% better, fair enough. Then you come out about even. But those are a couple of ifs. And that's where him being willing to sign an extension, even at the age he's at, because guard he's not playing wide receiver.
Right.
At the level he played at last year before the switch to left tackle, I would have been really interested if I were the Chiefs in keeping Thuney around another couple of years, especially since you're drafting a left tackle. That might have prevented you from signing Trey Smith long-term, but if you're getting elite guard play at one of your guard positions and you're going to get it for 2 or 3 years either way, I guess I'd take the guy that's, $4, $5, $6 million a year cheaper.
This might be now putting maybe we shouldn't even mention Jawan Taylor in this. Obviously, it's his last year in Kansas City, barring something crazy. But
Right.
When you do look at Jawan Taylor and Trey Smith being just this weird fit that have never quite meshed together, despite both of them being pretty good players, Jawan Taylor's penalties are the asterisks everyone knows about. Meanwhile, you are looking at the future of Josh Simmons trying to be your left tackle of the future. If we're talking about fit, Trey Smith, Jawan Taylor, not good. Josh Simmons, Kingsley Suamataia feels a lot worse than Josh Simmons, Joe Thuney, right? There's
Correct.
the meshing of a 5-man front seems like it probably matters.
Absolutely. And that's another weird aspect to all of it, honestly. And so again, I'm happy for Joe Thuney. I'm happy that they've got Trey Smith in house. It just is interesting to me if their position was we have to keep one of our guards and trade one of our guards. They could have gotten a better return for Trey Smith. And again, what I would advocate for, hey, keep them all. They're all the great players. You would have gotten a better return for Trey Smith, and you wouldn't maybe have as many of these ifs. But your if would still be, what if Joe Thuney drops off and or Trey Smith takes another step forward? Well, then you've got egg on your face that way. There's risk either way, and my job's not on the line. But it is just interesting to me because I always was curious with a Thuney extension, because the way they did it, they also just tacked on 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't tear up this first year to buy salary cap space because
there's none of the details are on Spot Tracker over the cap or anything right now, but that's the structure that we've seen to this point.
Right. And so maybe it'll be a little bit different. But, if he was willing to sign at 17.5 mil per year on average, they could have fiddled with it and bought themselves cap relief this year too. And that's another difference between that and then dealing with the franchise tag. And the reason why, for people that are listening and wondering what Trey Smith might be asking for right now, he's on the franchise tag
23.4.
23.4, which it means his agent is going to the Chiefs saying 23.4 a year.
Right.
Give it to us. And then they're fighting about structure. And the Chiefs are saying that's ridiculous because the next highest right guard is at 20.5. And that's where that $3 million jump, it matters. And that's the other thing, is maybe another extension there would have been easier. Again, you've got, this is not an easy choice. And so this goes back to all the argument stuff we talked about earlier. This isn't me saying anything negative about Trey Smith or them keeping Trey Smith. I would have loved for them to keep the interior intact. And I think there was a path there to do that.
That path also might have been getting the Trey Smith deal done last year when they got the Creed Humphrey deal done. Or maybe it would have been a really painful move of trying to move. See, maybe they did this, and I assume they didn't, but I don't know. Of what is Trey Smith's market this time a year ago? Because now you're in the tag and trade, and if you're trying to do all of that, the leverage was never in the Chiefs' favor once the season ended, and Trey Smith was still healthy and good at football, right? That's the injury risk is the reason you don't bet on yourself. Trey Smith seems to have, and now he's in line for a market resetting deal at guard. Giving out a market resetting deal that's really anywhere is a stressful thing. The Chiefs also have not given those out really. We talked a little bit last year, I think, right, about Mahomes and Kelsey and even Thuney and these guys. Not a lot of highest paid guys at their position. Creed Humphrey's deal just seemed so easy and looked so good still. There are only 32 centers. There are 64 guards. I understand the math of all of that. It's also the cost of paying Juwan Taylor and not being thrilled with the return on your investment there. Like that's the margins of all of this. Like you said, it's not a clear, obvious blowout. Like, how did you do this incredibly stupid thing that we all saw coming? Those are extremely rare circumstances.
Right.
The rarity of where it's clear and baffling, and even then, it's not clear and baffling to the team doing whatever they're doing. I am left in a less than overflowing place looking at the path the Chiefs have taken here now, where it feels like Trey Smith has a lot of the leverage. They've got their center, and then the guy they put all the eggs in the basket of last year is probably your starting left guard. And I feel pretty good about the left tackle contingency plan and upside. Right tackle is probably the same guy nobody's that happy with, whose salary cap hit is universally derided. You can't love the overall. I kind of see, by the way, the left tackle process. I don't have any problem with. I think we talked about this on Tuesday, but the entire process and result of the offensive line, I feel like, is fair game to poke at a little bit, especially considering that the first act of this show was about how the offensive line helped kill the deep passing game last year.
Right. A lot of the analysis here changes if Juwan Taylor played at an elite level rather than above average to good with bad penalties. And bad penalties drag good down, right? Yep. You can't be the most penalized tackle in the league and be good unless you are Trent Williams on the non-penalty downs, and he's not. Right. So that's a real problem. So the overall line, it's funny. I'm actually writing right now a piece on whether the Chiefs roster is better than it was last year, like looking at who saw significant snaps. And the offensive line is going to be a really interesting one because there are some questions there that didn't exist 2 years ago. So it's I like you said, the entire process, you're trying to kind of feel it out. If the Smith extension were done, I'd feel a little better about the process. If they had kept Tooney and an extension was done, I feel better about the process. Because Tooney's still up in the air, it feels like there's an incomplete asterisk hanging out there.
And that also, my button on it is just that it's going to be an astronomical amount of money for Trey Smith. Not necessarily catastrophic, certainly not unearned. It's just going to look more like Chris Jones's deal than you're thinking right now. I think that's kind of like, it's Trey Smith, get his deal. He's a lineman, you'll figure it all out. He's going to be one of those cap hits who you are building around the next several years into the future, and at least, I would say almost certainly, at least 2 years beyond where Joe Tooney's cap hits would be something to work around. Again, you're betting on him being an ascending player. He just has to ascend beyond Joe Tooney over the course of the next few years, which is a huge, huge ask of a guard because there are very few who ascend beyond where Joe Tooney's at right now.
I agree with all that.
We can ride that fence all the way to training camp, and eventually I think we will get a Trey Smith deal. Those die have been cast. I just don't know what the numbers are going to be when they come up. One thing that was a little surprise, and this can be our finale here today, Seth, we thought the tush push was dead on Tuesday. We thought the tush push was going away, and they ended up, 2 votes short? That's, by the way, the funniest part of all of this is that, I hear a lot about this divided world we're living in right now, this crazy, crazy time. When you can't get 32 NFL owners on the same page on something, we're so doomed. Like there are very few more homogenous groups than that one. And they got Jason Kelsey in the boardroom pushing tushes and pounding tables, and the tush push survives another year, and the Lions, in the shame they deserved, withdrew their proposal about the playoff reseeding. So bullying worked there. I am really glad the reseeding thing didn't happen. I am honestly pretty close. I hate to take your spot here, Seth. I'm pretty close to straight up and down neutral on the tush push. I can't believe we've talked about it this much as a society. It feels like it has achieved a profile far exceeding its actual impact in the game of football. But the tush push survives. The playoff seeding thing is flushed down the toilet where it belongs. What did you think about Wednesday's activities and the rules the NFL did not adopt?
One of the things that I think is that if it didn't have an easy name, it would have maybe a tenth of the conversation it has.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it was about the play where the Eagles are intentionally using contact to push the quarterback forward on a QB sneak, no one's going to care that much.
So true.
I think the way that it was presented doomed it to failure and should have, because they focused on a particular play. And they focused on it for, well, this isn't very good looking. This isn't how the game is supposed to be played, whatever. Well, that's what they used to say about the forward pass. That's what they used to say about, various jet sweep motions. I remember when teams used to kind of, joke about all these, cute little motions and gimmicky things that Andy Reid's offense was doing before a lot of people started to do it. Shovel passes are still football. These little inside screens to Travis Kelce and Clyde and that kind of stuff, that's all part of football. What they should have done, and I think the reason they didn't, is because it's one of fans' favorite plays, is when a running back is fighting through contact 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, and he just tries to keep the legs churning, but his forward progress gets stopped. And then Trey Smith comes barreling in and pushes him forward for 3, 4, 5 yards. And the funniest plays when that happens are when the running back's feet get lifted off the ground. And we're not even faking it anymore. The only skill the runner has there is he doesn't go down. That's fair. That's a skill. But, I mean, he's not the one pushing the pile. Whenever they say that, it drives me nuts. Where this teacher, look at him move the pile. I'm like, do you not see the 3 gigantic humans pushing him?
What the 3 bulldozer-shaped men who are directly behind him?
Yeah. And so what they should have done, in my opinion, was just restate the rule that's already in place, that ball carriers aren't supposed to get helped in that way. Just clarify that and say that's the rule now. So this whole moving the pile thing would go away. It would affect a few plays a game, and it would effectively ban the tush push without saying that's what you're doing. Because really, we've seen it. Other teams can't do it as well as they do. Good for them. They mastered a play that gives them a distinct advantage in a certain sense. But if we were going to ban plays that are absurdly effective, then or that look ugly, well, quarterback sneaks on 4th and 1 are ugly and almost always work. You know what's a really ugly play that always works? Kneeling the ball out at the end. So let's not pretend that that's if you focus it on one play, that deserves to get shot down. One play that one team has figured out how to run better than everyone else. I think it deserved to get shot down. I do think they should revisit the issue entirely, because I'm actually not really, as funny as it is, I'm not a fan of the whole bulldozer thing either. So take them both out of the game, and then you're not singling out any one team.
I think I would support legislation that banned the quarterback kneel, though, or any kneeling behind the line of scrimmage. Maybe I'm willing to actually follow that line of thinking until everybody. It was Miami a year or two ago, right? Who handed the ball off for absolutely no reason, fumbled, and then lost that game.
Right.
I would be okay if everyone was forced into those circumstances. Now it's way more interesting. I mean, you got to at least all right, we're giving the ball to Kareem Hunt 3 times here. They're punching the football and he's got 2 hands down like that. I feel like we could get some momentum going on that one, but I guess we needed to have a more catchy name for it to get the amount of discourse that it deserves. So I'll take up that
Absolutely.
cause.
And that really is it.
Seth, I would hate to force you to have too strong of a take on banning quarterback kneels. So I am going to go ahead. I will take that one. I am, from this point forward, staunchly against kneeling the ball out to end games as a rule. I mean, I think you should do it when you're allowed to, but I think we should ban that in one of the next 7 or 8 owners meetings that apparently happen every offseason. That was another surprise to me this year. I just feel like there have just been a lot of meetings and get-togethers for the NFL to ultimately decide not to do something. So at least that's a familiar posture. Seth, as always, you can read his review of the entire deep passing game, all the factors at hand there, the Chief of the North newsletter, chiefsfan.substack.com. And Seth, because it's just you and me here, the final honors of today's show once again fall to you.
Well, I deeply appreciate that. You know what? I'm thinking about what you said about how the owners basically had this incredible ado, and it was an excuse for a 45-minute speech from Lurie. Is that what I heard reported? Was it an hour or was it 45
hear
minutes?
That doesn't sound fun to me. If you would have said 45 minutes from Jason Kelsey, I would have been at least intrigued.
That's just insane. But that's maybe the first time I've ever really identified with NFL owners, because all I can think about now is, when Jazz and I are hanging out, we're trying to figure, the kids are in bed. Let's watch a little show. What should we watch? Well, we've already watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine a couple times. We've already watched New Girl. We've already watched, you name various shows. We've watched
network
a lot
sitcoms,
of them.
you've seen them.
Yeah. But even a lot of, other more intense things, whatever.
Big Young Sheldon Family. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
Okay.
But we will sit there and, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And then what often happens is, man, it's 11. What if we just turned it off? We scrolled Instagram together for a couple minutes, watched a few amusing shorts, and then go to sleep. So NFL owners, they're just like us. They go through long, convoluted processes to be like,
I'll tell you what, Seth, more than any time ever, I am glad that story had a deeply unclimactic ending.
Jeepers. Well, that would have ended with a too, so.